She only asked for $500, just enough to cover a few basic things. Nothing fancy, nothing outrageous. But instead of help, she got smirks, whispers, and cold judgment. People laughed behind her back, rolling their eyes at what they called her greedy request. In a room full of well-dressed people, she stood there, plain, quiet, and clearly not one of them. They saw her as simple, maybe even unworthy. But what no one knew was that this simple woman held a secret, one they would never forget. As she stood silently, trying to hold back tears, someone unexpected walked through the door. The room fell quiet. Every head turned. It was him, her husband. Calm, confident, powerful. And not just any man. He was a billionaire. The kind of person whose name held weight in boardrooms and headlines. But he didn't walk in with bodyguards or flash. He walked in with a quiet purpose and a signed check worth $2 billion. The same people who had mocked her seconds ago now looked stunned, unsure whether to run, hide, or apologize. But he wasn't here to cause a scene. He was here for her. And what happened next, what he said and did in front of everyone, changed the way they saw her forever. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about love, loyalty, and the quiet strength people often overlook. She never wanted to show off. She just wanted a little help. But what she got was something no one saw coming. So what did her husband say? And why did he bring $2 billion with him that day? Stay with me, because this story is only just beginning. Her name was Emma. She didn't wear designer clothes or carry expensive handbags. She wasn't the type to post flashy photos or talk about money. She lived quietly, kept to herself, and never asked for much. Most people assumed she was just a regular woman, maybe even a little too modest. No one in that room knew she was married to one of the most powerful men in the country. Emma had shown up to the charity committee meeting that morning like she always did, on time, respectful, and prepared. The group was planning an event to raise money for struggling families, and Emma, soft-spoken but sincere, had suggested that she could help by personally donating $500. It was all she could comfortably spare at the time. But instead of appreciation, there was silence. Then came the side glances, a few chuckles, and finally, a voice dripping with sarcasm. $500? That's generous. They didn't say it out loud, but their faces said everything. She didn't belong there. She wasn't one of them. What they didn't know was that Emma had once lived on the edge of poverty. That $500 meant something to her, not just in value, but in purpose. She knew what it felt like to need help and have no one care. That's why she offered it from her heart. But the room didn't see that. They just saw someone easy to dismiss. Then the doors opened, and her husband, Daniel King, the billionaire investor no one expected to see, walked in, carrying a check that could fund the entire event and more. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at Emma, then slowly turned toward the stunned crowd. What was he going to say next? Why had he come at that exact moment? Daniel didn't speak right away. He let the silence do the heavy lifting. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall. No one moved. The same women who had whispered behind Emma's back now avoided eye contact, their smiles long gone. Daniel finally walked over to the donation table, placed the check down, and glanced at the number. $2 billion. Not a donation, a statement. I heard there was a problem with a $500 offer, he said, his voice calm but clear. Funny. That offer came from the only person in this room who actually knows what it means to go without. Emma's eyes dropped to the floor, not because she was embarrassed, but because she knew this wasn't what she wanted. She hadn't told Daniel about the meeting. He found out on his own, and now everything was spiraling. The conflict wasn't just about money. It was about pride, assumptions, and quiet judgment. Behind the scenes, some of these committee members had always been skeptical of Emma. A few had even gossiped that she'd married Daniel for his wealth. They never saw the years she stood by him when he had nothing. The nights they shared one meal. The debts, the sacrifices, the hope they held onto when the world shut them out. And now, even with all the wealth, Emma still lived simply. She still gave with meaning. But her honesty was seen as weakness, and that's what hurt most. One woman at the back whispered to another, "He's only doing this to shame us." Another replied, "Or maybe to show us who really deserves respect." Daniel turned toward Emma and took her hand. The room was still frozen, because no one knew what he would say next, or what would happen after this moment. Daniel's fingers tightened gently around Emma's hand. He could feel the tension in her shoulders, the quiet weight of humiliation still fresh on her face. But he didn't look angry, he looked focused. The room, once full of chatter and laughter, now felt like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. He stepped forward, standing not behind Emma, but beside her. "You judged her for offering what she could," he said, his voice steady. "But not one of you asked why she gave. You saw the number, not the heart." Some of the committee members shifted in their seats, trying to look busy or disinterested, but the discomfort was written all over them. They had made their assumptions based on her simple clothes, her quiet tone, her small donation. None of them had cared to ask who Emma really was, or what she had been through to stand in that room. Daniel continued, "She didn't need to prove anything, but maybe all of you do." That hit like a cold wind. Even those who had stayed quiet during the earlier mockery now felt exposed. The woman who first mocked Emma tried to smile, as if to lighten the moment, but her voice cracked when she said, "It was just a misunderstanding." Emma looked up for the first time, her eyes calm but tired. "No," she said softly, "it wasn't." Meanwhile, outside the room, word was already spreading. Someone had filmed part of the exchange. Phones were buzzing. Whispers turned into wide eyes. Reporters were starting to call. Emma's name, once unknown, was now in the same sentence as a billionaire and a $2 billion check. Back inside, Daniel turned to the group one last time. "You all wanted donations. Well, here it is, but only if Emma signs it." Everyone froze. The air was thick. What would she do? Emma stared at the check. Her name wasn't on it, yet. All it needed was her signature. Daniel had made it clear. The donation would only happen if she was the one to authorize it. The entire room, once so sure of themselves, now hung on her next move. But Emma didn't reach for the pen. She looked around, scanning each face, some pale with guilt, others tense with fear of what might happen next. The power had shifted, but Emma wasn't interested in revenge. That's not why she came. Then came the twist no one expected. "I'm not signing it," she said, her voice calm but firm. The room gasped. Even Daniel blinked, surprised. "Not like this," she continued. "This isn't what giving is supposed to look like. I offered what I could, and I meant it. But this," she gestured to the check, "this feels like we're buying respect, and that's not the point." There was a heavy pause. A few people exchanged stunned glances. One of the women from the back, a younger volunteer who'd stayed quiet the entire time, stepped forward. "She's right," she said. "We were wrong. We've built this place to look generous, but somewhere along the way, we forgot what real giving means." That admission sent a ripple through the group, but the tension wasn't gone. In fact, it deepened, because now the committee wasn't just dealing with the shock of a billionaire's arrival. They were being called out for everything they claimed to stand for: reputation, integrity, purpose. Outside the doors, the sound of more voices rose. Journalists had arrived. The world was watching now. Emma had the choice. The check still lay on the table. The stakes weren't just about money anymore. They were about truth, and the next move would define everything. Emma stood in the center of the room, the weight of every stare pressing on her, but she didn't flinch. Slowly, she walked toward the table, picked up the check, and looked at it, not for the number, but for what it represented. It wasn't about $2 billion anymore. It was about values, dignity, and who she chose to be in that moment. Then, she turned to Daniel and asked, "What if we gave it somewhere else? The room fell silent again. The committee members looked stunned, their chance at history's biggest donation slipping away. Daniel nodded slowly, understanding what she meant. "Wherever you choose," he replied. Emma turned back to the group. "There are families outside these walls that need help. They don't care about titles or clothes or how much someone gives. They just need someone to care. So if we're giving this, we'll give it where it makes a real difference." A woman near the front, red-faced from earlier embarrassment, finally stood up. "Emma, we were wrong. I was wrong. Please, help us do better. Help us make this right." It was a small moment, but it cracked open the room. For the first time, it wasn't about ego. It was about listening. Emma nodded, then signed the check, but added something beneath her name, to be used only for those who need it most. Relief filled the room, but just as the tension seemed to lift, one of the reporters outside burst in. "Emma, is it true your husband wasn't always the billionaire?" The question struck like lightning. Daniel stepped forward, smiling faintly. "That's true," he said. "In fact, when I met her, she had more money than I did." The crowd gasped. The story had started with judgment of $500 and ended with a truth no one saw coming. The room was still processing Daniel's words. Emma, the woman they had judged for being too simple, had once supported the very man who now held the power to change their entire charity forever. The people who had scoffed at her $500 didn't just misjudge her, they missed the whole story. Her quiet strength, her humility, her deep understanding of what it means to give from the heart, it all stood in sharp contrast to the shallow assumptions made about her. Emma smiled, not out of pride, but peace. The truth was out now. Not just about the money, but about who she truly was. The woman who once gave her last paycheck to help a struggling neighbor. The woman who believed that giving wasn't about headlines, it was about heart. Daniel walked beside her as the crowd slowly began to shift. A few members of the committee approached to apologize. Others stood silently, clearly rethinking more than just the meeting. They were rethinking themselves. The younger volunteer who'd spoken up earlier asked Emma if she'd consider leading the next fundraising project. Emma paused for a moment, then nodded. "But only if we start with listening," she said, "and lead with empathy." Outside, the reporters had gathered, but Emma didn't rush out to face them. She stood quietly for a moment, watching through the glass doors. The world might now see her as the billionaire's wife who turned down a boardroom to give with purpose, but she didn't care about the labels. All she ever wanted was to help someone in need, even if it was just $500 at a time. And as she walked out holding Daniel's hand, there were no cameras that could capture what really mattered. That giving, when done from the heart, is always more powerful than gold.